know about you, but I'm inspired by all of these presentations. Our next presenter comes from India, Rajneesh Jain with Avani.
Hello everyone. My name is Rajneesh Jain from Avani. I'm one of the co-founders. Avani is a non-profit that works for technology development and livelihood promotion in central Himalayan region of India. And for those of you who have not traveled there, this picture is of the real mountains. We convert pine needles into electricity. We've set up a 9 kilowatt gasifier system, which has been running for last 3 years successfully and have been supplying electricity for our center. And now we propose to upscale, pilot this technology at a commercial scale, where we propose to set up 3 120 kilowatt each systems in 3 contiguous villages in this area. And for that, we need to raise $450,000 over a period of 2 years. We'll a little more details now. Now, try to dig deeper into the problem. I'd like you to meet Basanti Devi, this young woman who lives with her husband and 3 children in Balta village in Almora district of our area. For generations, her family has been living in this village. Her family has been very fortunate to have found livelihood options. They've depended on the forest for fuel wood, for fodder for their cattle, for water, for medicinal herbs, for timber, and everything. But Basanti Devi today is not that fortunate. She has to walk 4 miles every day to get fuel wood from the forest. Speak to her and she recounts that she's having to walk longer and longer every year to get that fuel wood. And water and fodder are becoming a problem for her family. They're so important for their livelihood because the cattle are dependent on the fodder and water both. Come summers every year, the forest around her village is on fire. And this is because of the pine needles that form a thick carpet on the forest floor. These pine needles are highly flammable. They are a cause of the quick spread of forest fire, and they burn anything that's trying to come up. Any native species that are trying to come up on the forest floor, they are very quickly burned down. Let's have a closer look at where she lives. This is in the blue is the part of India, the Uttarakhand state where she lives. The state shares its eastern border with Nepal and northern border with Tibet. And there are about 200,000 households, almost 1 million people in these 3 districts, Almora, Bageshwar, and Pithoragarh, where we work. These are the families which live close to the large tracts of pine forest. There are about 3.5 million people in the entire state that actually suffer those fires year after year, out of a total population of 11 million in this state. Now, as the fire rages in the forest around her village, she wonders, what if all this fire could be used to cook in her home and maybe generate some more energy for other work? But she knows she can't do it because pine needles are highly flammable. She cannot control the fire. So she needs some technology intervention to be able to do that. And this is exactly what we do. We convert destructive pine needles into clean and affordable energy, which generates incomes for people, which regenerates biodiversity because it's removing the cause of spread of forest fires and giving those saplings a chance to grow, and it also reduces carbon emissions. Now, before we have a closer look at the value chain of what we do, have a look at this picture. This is a typical pine forest in our area. Nothing else grows in this forest. You can actually look through it. There's only a thick carpet of pine needle, not a blade of grass. And people hate it because there's not a blade of grass. They need all that grass for their cattle. So what they do? They put it on fire so that they'll get rid of the pine needle and some grass will grow. But what happens is, with the fires, the forests start looking like in the third picture. It degrades completely because there's nothing else that grows. And we need to, this is what we seek to reverse. How do we do it? We propose to collect pine needles. That's what we do in our current system. We collect pine needles from the forest floor. They are transported to a central facility. Now, this facility, what does it do? This is a gasifier. You can see that there is a, yeah, I don't know if people can see, but this is the gasifier chamber where the pine needles are burnt under control conditions. 15% of those burn to bring the rest of 85% to a temperature of about 600 degrees Celsius, at which the pine needles start volatilizing. And those are all combustible gases that we get. Those combustible gases are cleaned. There's a series of filters you can see at the back. And those filters clean the gases before they are channeled into an engine. And this engine, it runs on 100% gas, drives an alternator which generates energy, electricity. This electricity will be sold to the local grid utility. Now, which is mandated to buy 3% of its total energy needs, electricity needs, from the renewable energy sources, and at a premium price. This is our major source of revenue also. The other thing that the gasifier does is about 10% of the pine needles do not gasify. They get converted into charcoal, something like what Jason was talking about before. And that charcoal will be used to fuel the kitchen. So Basanti Devi now can actually buy this charcoal instead of going and collecting fuel wood. What it also does is, when we remove the cause of the forest fire, the forests start looking like this. This is the actual real picture from where the pine needles have been removed for a couple of years now. Now, in doing that, we not only regenerate biodiversity, but also save carbon emissions. And carbon emissions, because we are stopping the forest fires, all that carbon dioxide being dumped in the atmosphere. We also save Basanti Devi from cutting trees for cooking in her kitchen, and that saves a lot of carbon emissions. The value of this carbon emissions is almost about $20,000 a year for one system, though it's very difficult to kind of get a credit for that, so we haven't yet built it in our business plan, but this is a future revenue possibility that we are building on. Now, the question you might ask me is, when Basanti Devi is so poor, how can she actually buy charcoal? Now, members of her family and other members of the village will actually go collect pine needles, which will be sold to the utility, and that will afford them income to be able to buy all the amenities that they need in the village. Have a look at the finances. What we need is actually, we need to spend about $200,000 every year for 3 years to be able to buy 3 systems. We need a investment of $300,000 in the first year and $150,000 in the second year, and after that, at this level, we do not seek any more investments. We make about $28,000 every year in the first year from one gasifier system, but when it goes to 3, it rises to about $38,000 a year, which is much higher. So there's a very clear profitability thing here. The ending cash curves looks like this. It actually shows a robust growth in the 3rd year when we do not take any more loans, and we can start either repaying the loan, or if it's a grant, then we can keep setting new systems up, and that's how it looks. Now, what are the challenges? The technology is one of the major things that we needed to work on. We adapted the technology to pine needles and field tested it, and now there is capability within the organization to be able to upscale it. The community we work with, we know their problems, we understand their needs, and that is how we are going to be able to upscale this program. The regulators, which are government in our case, we have sufficient credibility and experience of working with government. So They should help us in upscaling our program. So we are going to affect 1,500 people. We are going to generate cooking fuel for 1,500 people from the charcoal that's going to be sold to Basanti Devis. 400 hectares of land is going to be regenerated. What I should mention here is that each gasifier would be able to clear about 135 hectares of land from pine needles and give the biodiversity a chance to regenerate. We will generate 2160 megawatt hours of electricity from each year, and that is like equivalent of 24,000 people's needs in the villages. And we start generating surplus revenue in the third year of operation. Now, doing this, we provide a opportunity for about 300 families like Basanti Devis to be able to stay in their village, because now they can make an income, they've got fuel there, and the regenerated biodiversity will help them get water, fodder, and things like that. This is also paving way for 3.5 more million families in this state to try and adopt this solution. And we have tremendous upscaling potential in neighboring state of Himachal Pradesh, neighboring country of Nepal, in other mountain ranges like Andes, parts of Africa. What I'd like to mention here is that this commercial pilot would also give us space to look at our organizational systems and perhaps help us zero in on models for investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajneesh. Anne-Marie?
Sure, I'd be happy to. One thing I found really helpful as you told your story was you told a story. You started with a person and you gave us a really good sense of her experience and what that meant through the life of the opportunity that you were sharing. And I found that really helpful. One thing I think might have been helpful at the end to sort of bring that to life might have been actually, when you had such a nice set of metrics, bringing that down into metrics for people and metrics for the environment, or doing something at the end where, because you're actually having impact in a lot of different ways on the communities in which you're working, that could really be highlighted. And then since some of those have ripple effects, so it changes not only the opportunity for the 1,500 people in the village, but also for people who have access to energy down the line, I think you could have structured it in a way that could have highlighted a lot of interesting downstream benefit too. And one other thing that would be helpful for me to understand, and I have to say this is probably because I'm a grant giver usually, but when people sort of lump in the same bucket, and this is money I'm going to get from grants or loans, that always really puzzles me, because to me there's a really different thought process you would go through to decide where you would get money and temporally how long you would need it for and how you might repay it versus not, what the incentive sets of the people are that would give you those different kinds of money. So I'd encourage you to continue to unpack that, because I think that would be helpful for you. But thank you.
Thank you.
Russ?
And continuing on the metrics thing, once you built up the story, it's clear you're depending on these first 3 units to work. And I was trying to find the way to plug into what the unit economics were at that level. You know, I was trying to see how big was the village, how far out did the gathering area have to go, what would the economics be in terms of turning positive. You mentioned that in your cumulative slides, but it would have been easier for me to pick that up if you had shown me one and then gone to the layering that. So that just would have helped me a little bit more with that. The second thing, and maybe just in the background here, it's clear you're turning a switch and you're putting this to use. So has there been some breakthrough in gasification of pine needles that has allowed this to happen, that it hasn't happened so far? Is it, so just maybe a little bit more history or anecdote, you know, why is this right now of the time? Is it technology has changed? Is it you've seen it deployed somewhere else and it just hasn't been deployed in your part of the pine needle forest up against the mountains? You know, a little bit more why this switch is turning on right now. I missed a little bit of that history.
So Rajneesh, for me, I'd say my biggest set of questions are all around pine needles. So I know what they are, but I have no idea how many bushels or however you measure pine needles. You know, how much can a person pick up in an hour, a day, whatever? How far do I have to walk. You made the comment, the story about the woman having to walk further all the time to get things. Well, it seems to me, in my mind, she might have to be walking further and further and further every year or every month, I don't know, to get pine needles. So I don't know, the supply and the economics of pine needles, I don't know anything about, and you didn't tell me. And then my perception from occasionally having pine needles in my fireplace is that they just go poof, and they burn like instantly. So I have somewhere between no idea what their fuel capabilities are, or the little idea I have is kind of a negative one, which it seems like they're so instant, you don't get a lot of bang for your buck or BTU for your needle or whatever the right. So because this, I've actually never heard anybody do this on pine needles. I think you'd actually have to address, as part of this, kind of the down and dirty part of, here's how this works specifically with pine needles. And then the unit model that was mentioned, you can build up from there. Brad, any last? We got a little bit of time. So.
I agree 100% with everything that was said. And having just finished Husk Power last year, I'm a big fan of biomass gasification. But in that, we know that a big issue of it is just what Jeff brought up, the transportation. So I have the same picture in my mind of how far is she going out to collect these. But I like how you've turned a negative in terms of transportation cost of biomass into an income-generating business for the person to collect. So I think that is a good twist on it. But I kind of have the same need to know how many hectares per kilowatt. So how fast does it regenerate? Because you have, I don't know if you have one crop of pine needles a year or two crop of pine needles a year. So something along the economics that would show that works would be useful. And along the lines that Anne-Marie was saying, I have the same question, although I think you can solve the problem of grant versus loan from the point of view of once you do the pilot, and I think if you had these economics down for the pilot, that's probably more grant because it's high risk. But I think if you prove this, then you're definitely a candidate for a loan because this is like a utility company, and that would be financed by loan. You'd put the plant in, and then you'd get a stream of income over time. So clearly be a loan candidate, but right now I think with the questions, it's probably risk. So that would be grant transfer to loan. Once you de-risk it, might be a way to think about that.
Okay.
By the way, Rajneesh, one more, since I had made a note, but Brad reminded me of the Husk Power analogy. I think you said that you do all this, you then create gas, which creates energy, which then you sell to the utility. So I was just interested, how come you don't use it? How come you guys don't use that energy rather than sell it? So you've got a minute or so to respond to at least a couple of these.
Yeah. So just for everyone to know that pine needles have very high calorific value, as good as high quality wood. And we get about 12 tons of pine needles from a hectare. And you need about 135 hectares of forest to run a 120 kilowatt power plant for 24 hours a day, 300 days a year. So those are the economics. And we generate power at about 4 cents a unit, and we sell it at 10 cents a unit. So those are the unit economics.
4 cents a kilowatt hour?
4 cents a kilowatt hour. That's 1 unit, right? Yeah.
This is getting more interesting all the time, but we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Those are good numbers to put up there.
Yeah.
And I think I just forgot your last comment, Jeff.
That was close enough, Rajneesh.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.